Hi, I got a visit from Mrs. Morzinski yesterday, and she gave me your next book for book club, and it is The Chronicles of Noria, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and it is book number 9 in a series. And um, I know that they gave us a cast of characters, and I'm going to read a few of them because we got to get sort of caught up. And Digroy was we seen him in the magician's nephew. That was the very first story, and he actually is very courageous, and he was the nephew of the magician who was a professor who kind of got him into Narya. And Digroy is actually very brave, and because he has a hard time coming back from Narya. Then there's Polly, which is Digroy's friend. Um, and she was the very first one to leave this world. And there's Uncle Andrew, who is actually the one that had, he's a magician and he's not that good. And um, most people who deal with magic um, really are not that good. And he finds out that he's not, but he still thinks he is. And then we got a whole new cast of characters that we'll find out who they are as we go along. Um, and the first chapter is Lucy Looks into the Wardrobe. Once there were 4 kids, whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war. Because of the air raids, they were sent to a house of an old professor who lived in the heart of the country, 10 miles away from the nearest railroad station and 2 miles from the nearest post office. He had no wife and lived in a very large house with a housekeeper named Mrs. McRoy and 3 servants. Their names were Ivy, Margaret, and Betty, but they do not come into the story much. He himself is a very old man with shaggy white hair, which grew over most of his face as well as his head. And they liked him almost at once. But the first evening when they came out to meet them at the front door, he was odd looking that Lucy, who was the youngest, was a little afraid of him, and Edmund, who was the next youngest, wanted to laugh and had to keep on pretending he was blowing his nose to hide it. As soon as they had said good night to the professor and gone upstairs on the first night, the boys came into the girls' room and they all talked it over. They fallen We've fallen on our feet, and no mistake, said Peter. This is going to be perfectly splendid. That old chap will let us do anything we like. I think he's odd, dear, said Susan. Of co- oh, come off it, said Edmund, who was tired and pretending not to be tired, which always made him bad-tempered. Don't go on talking like that. Like what? Susan said. And anyway, it's time that we were in bed. Trying to talk like mother, said Edmund. And who are you to say when I'm going to bed? Go to bed yourself. Hadn't we all better go to bed? Said Lucy. There's sure to be a row if we're heard talking here. A row means to have a fight or a disagreement. No, there won't, said Peter. I'll tell you, this is the sort of a house where no one's going to mind what we do. Anyway, we won't hear they won't hear us. It's about 10 minutes walk from here down to the dining room and any amount of stairs and passages in between. What's that noise? Said Lucy suddenly. It was a far larger house than she'd ever been in before, and thought of all the long passages and rows of doors leading into empty rooms were beginning to make her feel a little creepy. It's only a bird, silly, said Edmund. It's an owl, said Peter. This is going to be a wonderful place for birds. I shall go to bed now, I say. Let's go and explore tomorrow. You might find your anything in you might find anything in a place like this. Did you see those mountains we came along? In the woods, there might be eagles. There might be stags. There'll be hawks. Badgers, said Lucy. Foxes, said Edmund. Rabbits, said Susan. But then the next morning came. There was a steady rain falling so thick that when they looked out of the window they could see neither the mountains nor the woods, nor even the streams in the garden. Of course it would be raining, said Edmund. They had just finished their breakfast with the professor and were upstairs in the rooms he had set apart for them. A long, low windows with two long, low rooms with two windows looking out in one direction and two in another. Do stop grumbling, Ed, said Susan. 10 to 1, it'll clear up in an hour or so, and in the meantime, we're pretty well off. There's there's a wireless and lots of books. Not for me, said Peter. I'm going to explore in the house. Everyone agreed to this, and that was how the adventure began. It was the sort of a house that you never seemed to come to an end of, and it was full of unexpected places. The first few doors you tried led only into a spare room, as everyone had expected that they would. But soon they came to a very long room full of pictures, and there was found to be a suit of armor. And after that room, there was all hung with green, with a harp in the corner. And then came 3 steps down and 5 steps up, and there a kind of a large upstairs hall, with a door that led into a balcony, and then a whole series of rooms that led into each other and were laden with books. Laden means a lots of books, that there was tons of books all over, and some bigger than a Bible in a church. And softly after that they looked into a room that was quite empty. And shortly after that they looked into a room that was quite empty, except for one big wardrobe, the sort that has a looking glass in the door. There was nothing else in the room at all except for a dead blue bottle on the windowsill. Nothing there, said Peter, and they all trampled out again, all except Lucy. She looked left. She stayed behind because she thought it would be worth the while trying the door of the wardrobe, even though she felt almost sure that it would be locked. To her surprise, it opened quite easily, and two mothballs dropped out. Looking into the inside, she saw several coats hanging up, mostly long fur coats. There was nothing Lucy liked as much and as she smell and feel fur. She immediately stepped into the wardrobe and got in among the coats and rubbed her face against them, leaving the door open, of course, because she knew that it was very foolish to shut oneself in any wardrobe. Soon she went further in and found that there was a second row of coats hanging up inside behind the first one. It was almost quite dark in there, and she kept her arms stretched out in front of her so that she would not bump her face into the back of the wardrobe. She took a step further in, and then two, and then 3 steps, almost expecting to feel wooden against the tips of her fingers, but she couldn't feel it. This must be the simply enormous wardrobe, thought Lucy, going still further in and pushing the soft folds of the coats aside to make room for her. Then she noticed that there was something crunchy under her feet. I wonder, is that more mothballs, she thought, stooping down to feel it with her hands. But instead of feeling the hard, smooth wood of the floor of the wardrobe, she felt something soft, powdery, and extremely cold. This is very queer, she said, and um, she went um, on a step further or two. The next moment, she found that she was rubbing against her face, and hands were no longer soft fur, but something hard and rough and even prickly. "Why, this is just like the branches of a tree!" exclaimed Lucy, and then she saw that there was a light ahead of her, not a few inches away, where the back of the wardrobe ought to be, but a very long way away off. Something cold and soft was falling on her. At a moment later, she found that she was standing in the middle of a woods at night time, with snow under her feet and snowflakes falling through the air. Lucy felt a little frightened, but she felt very inquisitive and excited as well. She looked back over her shoulder, and there behind the dark tree trunks she could still see the open doorway of the wardrobe, and even caught a glimpse of the empty room from which she had set out. She had, of course, left the door open, for she knew that it was very silly thing to shut oneself into a wardrobe. It seemed to still be daylight there. I can always get back if anything goes wrong, thought Lucy. She began to walk forward, crunch, crunch, over the snow, and thought, though the woods towards the other light. It was about 10 minutes, and she reached it, and found that it was a lamp post. As she stood looking at it, wondering why was a lamp post in the middle of a wood, and wondering what to do next, she heard a pitter patter of feet coming towards her, and soon after a very strange person stepped out from among the trees into the light of the lamppost. He was only a little taller than Lucy herself, and he carried over his head an umbrella white with snow from the waist upward. He was like a man, but his legs were shaped like a goat. The hair on them was glossy black, and instead of feet, he had goat hoofs. He also had a tail, but Lucy did not notice this at first because it was neatly kept up um, over the arm that held the umbrella, as um, so as it kept it from trailing in the snow. He had a red woolen muffler around his neck. That means a scarf. Um, and his skin was rather reddish too. He had a strange but pleasant little face, with a soft, pointed beard and a curly hair. And out of the head there was two horns, and one um, on each side of his forehead. One of his hands, as he um, as I had said, held an umbrella, but the other arm was carrying several brown paper parcels. Parcels mean packages. With with the parcels and the snow, it looked just as if he'd been doing some Christmas shopping. He was not a fawn, and when he saw Lucy, he gave such a sort of surprise that he dropped all his parcels. "Goodness gracious me," said the fawn. Okay, so that's the end of chapter one. Um, so we met a new character. We met Fawn. Um, well, and actually, um, yeah, so we met those two. And actually, I don't know if you know what a wardrobe is, but this is a picture of a wardrobe. This is what the wardrobe is. It actually happens to be like a closet. A lot of people stored all their clothes in there, as what was Lucy was describing. A lot of older houses never had closets because most people didn't have too many clothes, so they had a piece of furniture that was like just a big box, but it was more decorative, and they would put their clothes in that. But they would be able to hang all their dresses and all their pants and jackets and stuff. But once again, they didn't have as many as what we did. They were probably lucky. Most people probably had only like two changes of clothes. They wear one all week, and then they had one good pair of clothes for like their Sunday best. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 1. Pretty exciting, eh? I'll see you later.